Coming up on this Monday edition of Newsline at noon, President Park Geun-hye arrives in Kuwait on the first leg of her trip to the Middle East. Top of her agenda is securing stronger cooperation in the energy, construction and IT sectors. North Korea fires 2 Scud missiles into the East Sea on the first day of South Korea's joint annual military drills with the United States. Well, Samsung unveils its new Galaxy S6 and S6 Edge smartphones at the Mobile World Congress in Barcelona. The new models will be available in 20 countries from April 10th. These stories and more on Newsline at noon.
It's new Monday, March 2nd here in Korea. Thanks for tuning in. Live from Seoul, I'm Eoh Jin-joo.
It's very good to have you with us. I'm Mark Broome. Our top story at this lunchtime, President Park Geun-hye is in Kuwait, the first of 4 Middle Eastern countries she plans to visit this week.
The president is looking to expand Korea's economic cooperation with the region beyond the usual oil and construction projects. Our Choi-sun, who is traveling with the president, followed this report from Kuwait City.
Since Korean businesses started winning construction projects in the Middle East in the 1970s, the region has become Korea's largest overseas market for plant construction, generating nearly 40% of total orders received. Korea also depends heavily on oil imports from the Middle East. During her trip, President Park Geun-hye will seek a more diversified and deeper economic cooperation with the region to bring about a new growth engine for the Korean economy. Speaking to reporters prior to departing Seoul, the president said that in preparation for the post-oil era, the Middle East is seeking to diversify its oil-centered industries and improve quality of living through developments in education, healthcare, and infrastructure. She says this fits perfectly in line with her 3-year economic plan to spur growth through innovation and structural reforms.
이번에 이제 제2 중동의 붐을 하는 것은 그 중동 지역하고 또 국가들하고 한국하고 또 이렇게 인연이 깊은 것 같아요. 우리 다양한 그 기업들이나 이런 데서 가가지고 서로 협력을 할 일이 많아졌죠.
So when President Park meets Middle Eastern leaders this week, she will discuss expanding Korea and the region's economic cooperation to include healthcare, IT, education, and culture. The cooperative relationship will also develop from simply providing the region with labor and infrastructure to sharing knowledge and launching joint ventures. President Park is scheduled for back-to-back meetings with Kuwait's Amir, parliamentary speaker and prime minister on Monday. While economic cooperation will likely dominate their discussions, President Park also plans to seek Kuwait's support behind the North Korea and unification policies. Choi-sun, Arirang News, Kuwait City.
Now, after she returns from her 9-day trip, President Park is expected to meet with the leaders of the ruling and main opposition parties at the presidential office of Cheongwade sometime in mid-March. A spokesperson for the ruling party says the proposal was made by Saenuri Party leader Kim Moo-sung, to which New Politics Alliance for Democracy leader Moon Jae-in and the president agreed. The consensus was reached when the three sat down together on Sunday before an event commemorating Korea's March 1st Independence Movement Day. The brief meeting was the first of its kind for the trio. President Park and Moon Jae-in are no strangers. They went toe-to-toe against each other in the 2012 presidential election, but they haven't sat down for talks since. Turning now to the brewing tensions on the Korean peninsula that usually accompany the start of the joint annual military drills between South Korea and the U.S. North Korea wasn't slow to react this time around, firing 2 short-range missiles into the East Sea at the crack of dawn. Hwang Sang-hee reports.
It appears North Korea launched the 2 short-range missiles in protest against the joint military drills between South Korea and the United States. South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff said the missiles, with a range of around 500 kilometers, were fired into the East Sea from the western port city of Nampo at around 6:30 a.m. Korea time on Monday. It said the firing is probably North Korea's way of showing its opposition to the key resolve and full legal exercises, and added it remains vigilant against any additional launches. Some 220,000 South Korean and American troops are taking part in the annual joint military drills that began on Monday. The 2-week-long Key Resolve exercise is a computerized command post training aimed at improving the combined forces' operation and combat capabilities. The full legal exercise is a field training involving a set of land, sea, and air maneuvers and runs till late April. This year, the U.S. has deployed a 3,500-ton combat ship, the USS Fort Worth, for the first time. The annual exercises always spark violent protests from Pyongyang. North Korea's military released a statement on Monday, vowing to retaliate, claiming the drills are a rehearsal for a northward invasion. Seoul and Washington say the exercises are purely defensive in nature. Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News.
And senior diplomats from the two Koreas will go head-to-head at the United Nations Geneva headquarters this week. The main topics of debate will be North Korea's human rights issue and its nuclear weapons program. Connie Kim reports.
The two Koreas are likely to have a heated debate in Geneva this week over North Korea's dire human rights situation and the regime's nuclear program. North Korea's Foreign Minister Lee Soo-yong will deliver a keynote speech at the UN Human Rights Council on Tuesday, during which he's expected to condemn the adoption of a UN resolution that calls for the North Korean leadership be referred to the International Criminal Court. Pyongyang has been demanding its human rights record be expunged after North Korean defector Shin Dong-hyuk admitted to falsifying parts of his story about his experiences in a prison camp. However, South Korea will refuse to budge on the issue, as Seoul's Vice Foreign Minister Cho Tae-yeol is expected to call for follow-up measures to the UN human rights resolution during his speech.
Human rights is a very sensitive issue for the North Korean regime. It seems as though North Korea will use all means and efforts to dodge the issue.
The clash is likely to continue during talks over Pyongyang's nuclear program at the Conference on Disarmament. Echoing his comments from the previous UN address, the North Korean minister will almost certainly defend his country's nuclear program by stressing it's necessary for national security.
The nuclear issue will be resolved if and when the threat to our sovereignty and right to life is removed. That means the termination of Washington's hostile policy toward our country.
South Korea's diplomat will likely call for greater international efforts to push the North to give up its nuclear arms. This will mark the first time for a top North Korean diplomat to address the Human Rights Council and the Disarmament Conference. Experts say Pyongyang is desperate to counter the swell of international criticism over its human rights abuses and make the case for its widely condemned nuclear weapons program. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
A Japanese historian says he hopes his book on the forced mobilization of Koreans during Japan's colonial rule will help restore the dignity of those who suffered. Yasuto Takeuchi told ENM News on Sunday, which was Independence Movement Day here in Korea, that he published the book this year to coincide with the 50th anniversary of diplomatic relations between South Korea and Japan. His book, published in late January, contains the names and details of over 10,000 Koreans subject to forced mobilization. Included are the person's age, residence, workplace, and place of death. The book states that after Japan's national mobilization law, which was in effect from 1939 to 1945, Koreans were first forcibly mobilized for military and labor purposes and deployed to Japan, Southeast Asia, and China. Takeuchi estimates up to 1/3 of the Koreans that were mobilized were killed.
Korea has posted a current account surplus every month for almost 3 years now. The Bank of Korea says January's surplus, the 35th consecutive monthly surplus, amounted to some $7 billion, edging down $80 million from the previous month. It's looking likely that Korea will break its previous longest monthly surplus streak of 3 years and 2 months. That was set in the late 1980s. It's not all good news, though, as a drop in exports coupled with a bigger drop in imports is driving the current account surplus trend at the moment. Exports dropped 10% in January from the previous year, while imports plunged almost 17%. The central bank says falling global oil prices are pulling down exports and imports. And Korea's industrial output dropped by its biggest margin in almost 2 years in January. Statistics Korea says output across all industries plunged 1.7% in January compared to the previous month. The agency attributes the drop to an unfavorable base effect in December last year, when the production in the mining and manufacturing sectors shot up by the most since September 2009. It also cited the Lunar New Year holiday that fell in February this year, as Koreans tend to spend less in the month before the holiday season. From a year earlier, Korea's industrial output edged up 0.7% by sector. Output in the mining and manufacturing sector dropped 3.7% in January from a month earlier, but rose 1.8% from a year ago. Samsung Electronics has unveiled its latest smartphones, the Galaxy S6 and S6 Edge, ahead of the Mobile World Congress in Barcelona. The new phones will hit the market in early April. Shin Se-min has the details.
This is Galaxy S6 and Galaxy S6 Edge.
These are the most advanced powerful smartphones in the world, with the capabilities no other phone can match. But that's not all. To use a technical engineering term, they also look really cool.
Could this be a game changer for Samsung Electronics? The specifications certainly do seem to make a strong case for that. Introduced Sunday at the Samsung Unpacked event ahead of the Mobile World Congress in Barcelona, the brand new Samsung Galaxy smartphones have a better grip on both design and composition. Sporting a dazzling glass and lightweight metal architecture, the Galaxy S6 and S6 Edge, which comes with a curved display, have a faster processor, a better camera, and most importantly, a fast-charging battery. Samsung ditched a replaceable battery in the S5 and added a wireless charging feature. The new Galaxy line will give the user 4 hours of battery life on a 10-minute charge, 1.5 times faster than the S5. The phone is loaded with a mobile payment system called Samsung Pay that allows for both NFC and magnetic secure transmission payments, much like Apple Pay does. The company is hoping the flashy new handset will help lift its flagging sales and put it back on the top of the global smartphone market after having lost out to Apple last year. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Now, Korea is planning to invest $285 million this year to enhance the safety of spent nuclear fuel. That's a 7.7% increase from last year. The Ministry of Science, ICT and Future Planning said on Monday that the money will be spent on nuclear energy development, radiation technology development, and in enhancing the safety of small and medium-sized nuclear reactors around the country. The government plans to continue its development of dry reprocessing methods for spent fuel, in which 95% of reprocessed fuel can be recycled. The ministry also says it hopes to boost the global competitiveness of small nuclear reactors and build advanced research reactors.
Time now for a look through the global headlines we're following this Monday lunchtime from Seoul. For that, we turn to our Eunice Kim at the News Center.
Eunice, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is now in Washington. He's going to make his case before a joint Congress session against a nuclear agreement on Iran's nuclear program.
Yeah, that's right, Mark. Just as U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry heads to Geneva, where he hopes to finalize a nuclear pact with Iran ahead of a March 24th deadline. Now, before leaving on Sunday, America's top diplomat said Netanyahu was welcome to address U.S. lawmakers, but warned against inciting a, quote, political football. Netanyahu had accepted the invitation by Republican House Speaker John Boehner to speak before Congress on Tuesday Tuesday morning local time, despite protests from the Obama administration, which has maintained it was against protocol for a world leader to be given a platform weeks before a re-election. Prime Minister Netanyahu has been adamantly against an emerging Iranian nuclear deal, instead proposing more economic sanctions on Tehran to curb its nuclear ambitions. This as in Israel, where the country's leader faces a re-election. Voices of opposition grow louder. Zionist Union leader Isaac Herzog called on the prime minister to cancel his planned speech, saying it could cause strategic damage to Israeli-U.S. relations. New video footage has emerged that may provide clues to who was behind the assassination of outspoken Russian opposition leader Boris Nemtsov. This as a massive crowd gathered in Moscow on Sunday to honor the life of the slain Kremlin critic. Our Son Jung-in has the story.
Tens of thousands of people gathered in central Moscow on Sunday carrying Russian flags and marching alongside the river Moskva. The streets were filled with protesters holding placards that said, "I am not afraid," in memory of Boris Nemtsov, who was shot dead in the shadow of the Kremlin on Friday evening. Meanwhile, CCTV footage has emerged showing the moment of the shooting. The poor resolution video shows two people believed to be Nemtsov and his female companion walking across a bridge in central Moscow before a snow truck moves behind the couple to obscure the view of the shooting.
This is not a mere murder, but an act of terror. This is politically motivated, and we need to find the truth behind this terror attack.
Police believe there are two suspects involved and have expanded their investigation in search for them. The shooting happened 2 days before Nemtsov was to speak at a major anti-government rally. He was working on a report presenting evidence that he believed proved Russia was directly involved in the conflict in Ukraine, despite official denials from Moscow that it has supplied separatists with troops and weapons.
Boris declared that he would reveal persuasive evidence about the involvement of Russian armed forces in Ukraine.
Russian President Vladimir Putin has described the killing as a provocation and pledged to do everything to find and prosecute the killers and punish them. However, there are fears those responsible will never be found. Nemtsov's supporters believe shadowy elements in the Russian government were behind the killing of one of Putin's most prominent critics. Son Jung-in, Arirang News.
Iraqi Prime Minister Haider al-Abadi has announced an offensive to clear out the city of Tikrit, which has been under Islamic State control since the middle of last year. Al-Abadi, who is also the country's commander-in-chief, is said to personally direct this operation that would involve tens of thousands of Iraqi forces and militia in what is expected to be a fierce fight. Tikrit is the capital of the Saladin Governorate, which bridges the capital of Baghdad and the second largest city of Mosul, also held by the extremists. Meanwhile, security video aired in Turkey appears to show the 3 teenage girls from the UK in a bus stop in Istanbul en route to join the Islamic State group. They are believed to have crossed into Syria 1 day after leaving London 2 weeks ago, where they were met by awaiting IS militants. Meanwhile, monitors in Syria say the extremist group released at least 19 Syrian Christians on Sunday after kidnapping more than 220 in raids last week. A local leader said those released were roughly 50 years of age or older, adding that more than 200 people remain in captivity.
Well, it's that time of the week again where we have a look at our Industry Insights segment. And today we're going to take a look at Korea's very dynamic and rapidly expanding webtoon market.
Right. Cartoonists and the agencies that support them are pumping out content onto a variety of platforms, making it much easier for people to access. Kwon So-ah has the story.
Scrolling and touching. Anytime, anywhere. Korea's webtoon market is doing better than ever, spilling into other media like dramas and movies. The industry is expected to be worth some $270 million this year. Webtoon makers are kept extremely busy with loads of original content uploaded every day, and most of it is free. Back in the day when Koreans had to make do with comics printed in books and magazines like these, they never hesitated to dig into their pockets to buy or even borrow them.
Accessibility used to be key, but that led to the perception that Webtoon should be free.
More platforms charge money now. What attracts people to them is that there are no constraints in regards to their language or content.
Webtoon story writer Jeon Jin-seok, who is busy with his real estate serial Realtor, and Lee Jong-bum, whose psychological thriller webtoon Dr. Frost has been turned into a TV drama, agree that the boom helped rookie webtoonists and fostered intense competition, resulting in better overall quality. But the process takes more than major platforms and star webtoonists.
From producing to publication and promotion, we assist artists and decide on which pieces could be developed into dramas or even characters.
On portals, the only way to evaluate webtoons is by the number of hits. A Comics is a web magazine without comics. We provide information to the general public, not many fans.
What would take Korea's webtoon industry to the next level? Success overseas.
Before, individuals tried to elbow their way into the global market. But now, they have a better chance, as the web portals do it for them.
Experts say this year the industry could make its mark on the world stage, but only if it chooses the right themes, gets the translations right, and builds global networks. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
Now, whether you are a fan of the idea or not, implantable ID chips are no longer the stuff of science fiction. Well, at least not to the workers at an office complex in Sweden.
Yeah, the manufacturers say the relatively small chips do no harm to the body, but many have voiced concerns about privacy and security. Kim Min-ji has the details.
Forget your keys or leave your company ID card at home? That's no longer a problem for workers at Epicenter, a high-tech office complex in Sweden, as workers can now access things with just a wave of their hand. Their key is a 12mm radio frequency identification chip implant.
It felt pretty scary, but at the same time it felt very modern, very 2015.
Employees with the chip implant can get into the office and unlock the photocopier. They can also exchange business cards with people they meet by swiping a hand over their smartphone. Although the chip's functions are limited at this stage, the CEO of the complex expects much more.
Payments is, I think, one area. I think also for healthcare reasons, that you can sort of communicate with your doctor and you can get data on what you eat and sort of what your physical status is.
The chip implant is optional for workers in the office complex. The manufacturer says it poses no harm to the human body and will not set off metal detectors and is also safe during MRI scans. But while it may seem innovative and tech-savvy, some have voiced concerns that it could be an invasion of privacy and pose a threat to a person's security. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Good afternoon. It's March and most of us are hoping for spring, but actually there's dust in the air today. The numbers though are gradually decreasing for some parts, but it's still well above the average level, so be sure to have a protective mask with you. But apart from the dust, it should feel like spring this afternoon. We'll have plenty of sunshine, which should boost up the highs to the mild side. So the daytime high here in the capital will rise to 9. And Daegu and Busan will be peaking to 11 this afternoon. And as for the other regions, Jeju Island and Daejeon should see a high of 10 and 9, while Dokdo peaks at 6. And tomorrow we have a light rain in the forecast nationwide, and hopefully that clears out all the dust from the air. But be sure to have an umbrella with you and dress warmer. And this week will definitely be a transition period into spring with some chilly mornings ahead. And speaking of which, we spring around the corner. The forsythia will start to bloom as early as next Sunday over in Jeju, and Seoul will get to see the blossoms at the end of the month. Well, that's all for Korea, and here's international weather for viewers around the world.
Well, that pretty much does it for now. Those are the stories we're following at this hour.
Mark and I'll be back at the same time on Tuesday. Thank you for watching.